Good evening, and thanks for joining us. My name is Ingrid Geis, and I'm a member of the Metro North node of 350 Mass. I'm zooming in from Winchester, Mass this evening, and I'm inviting all of you to please introduce yourselves in the chat with your name and your town or city. 350 Mass and the Boston Metro chapter of the Climate Reality Project are pleased to bring you this screening and webinar in partnership with the Boston Globe and the producers of Climate Emergency Feedback Loops. In a moment, senior producer Bonnie Walsh will introduce our screening of permafrost, and we'll watch the short film together. It's about 11 minutes, and I think you will find it both moving and thought-provoking. After the film, Boston Globe reporter Sabrina Shankman will guide a discussion with our panel, focusing on the urgency of the climate crisis and the actions we can each take that will collectively lead to meaningful change. After the discussion, Sabrina will take questions, and we ask that you please use the Q&A feature, not the chat, to pose your questions. After the Q&A, I will leave you with a few closing thoughts on how you can get involved, including a calendar of steps that you can take each and every day from now through Election Day. And we are going to do all of this in 1 hour. We'll also follow up with an email that includes all of these action items that I've mentioned and a link to a recording of the event, minus the film. And with that, I am pleased to introduce Bonnie Walsh, senior producer of the documentary series Climate Emergency Feedback Loops. Bonnie?
Thanks, Ingrid. Hi, I'm Bonnie Walsh, and I wanted to let you know that the film you're about to see is part of a series called Climate Emergency Feedback Loops, as Ingrid said, and these are 5 short science programs that explain how warming feedback loops work and why they're important to understand if we want to successfully address the warming of the planet. Producer Barry Hershey, director Susan Gray, and I have the goal of educating people about these dangerous amplifying cycles that are leading to tipping points in the climate. We decided that making short films for the web would make them accessible to everyone and easy to share. Stylistically, we decided to follow Greta Thunberg's advice and listen to the scientists. And we interviewed leading climate scientists about their work in 4 areas: forests, permafrost, the atmosphere, and the poles. We launched the films in an exciting virtual event in January 2021 that included a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Greta that nearly 1 million people attended from around the world. We've since had virtual events with the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, members of the UK Parliament, the Massachusetts State Legislature, by invitation of King Charles at COP26 in Glasgow, among others. We also created a 1-hour broadcast version called Earth Emergency that has aired twice nationally on PBS and is being sold around the world. We hope that the permafrost film that you're going to see tonight inspires you to watch the other programs in the series. Every scientist we interviewed stressed the importance of talking about climate change, and sharing these films with friends and family is a great way to start the conversation. For free on our website, along with the films, is a science curriculum for grades 6 through 12 and discussion guides, and the films are captioned in 27 languages so they can be used globally. We believe the importance of educating yourself in order to have what you need to know to take action, and that's what tonight's event is all about, learning what we need to know to take action around climate change. And we'll be hearing more about that from the panel after the film. So thank you so much for coming to tonight's event, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Hello, friends. This is Bill McKibben from Third Act. Man, do I wish I was with you live on video. I'm not, because the doctor has called me in for some surgery, so that's why I'm missing things. And occasionally that happens to people, especially people of a certain age, which is what I want to talk to you about today. I know that there's many of you who think I will never become 60 in my entire life, and it's possible that you will remain young forever, but it's also possible that you have parents or grandparents who might be interested in joining others of us over the age of 60 in building this progressive fight around climate and democracy, the two things that go hand in hand and the two things we're starting to lose. We started Third Act about 6 months ago. People have been pouring in. We've got tens of thousands of people, chapters springing up all over the country. We're doing two huge projects that you can help us with. One is protecting elections this November, and the other is taking on the big banks, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, that bankroll climate change. We have good strategies for doing it. We have fun doing it. And we have a great deal of solidarity among people who need to show some solidarity now. We do not want to be the generation that leaves the planet in worse shape than we found it, and we do not need to if we fight like heck. In our earlier years, in our first act, we won many, many important battles for the environment and for democracy. Those are under threat now, which is why people are streaming in. So the next time you think yourself to say, okay, boomer, say, okay, boomer, let's get this done. Many thanks to you all, and especially to the wonderful people on this panel who are just people I admire immensely and whose work I can't commend to you highly enough.
Hi there, my name's Sabrina Shankman. I cover the climate crisis at the Boston Globe, and I'm very glad to be here tonight talking about one of my favorite things. I spend so much time writing and talking to experts about climate change, which can be a really heavy subject with really serious implications, as Bonnie's excellent film just showed. But it's not all hopeless. There's stuff that we can do. And it's really great, I think, to talk about where that power is and what we can do with that power. So I'm very glad to be joined tonight by three most excellent panelists. Just to give a bit of sense of how this is all going to go. The four of us are going to have a conversation around 7:45. We'll be opening this up to questions from you all. And I really hope that you'll submit some using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And I'll do my best to get to as many as I can. So I will quickly introduce the panelists now, and then we will get going. First up, we have Alice Qannik Glenn, who's an Inupiaq journalist from Alaska. Her podcast series, Alaskan Natives on the Front Line, explores the adaptability and resilience of Inupiaq in the face of climate change. Next, we have Maiyim Baron, who's on the leadership team of the Massachusetts chapter of Elders Climate Action, where she's helping engage concerned citizens to act on climate. And then we have Nathaniel Stinnett, founder and director of the Environmental Voter Project, which is working to identify millions of non-voting environmentalists and turn them into consistent voters. So tonight we're talking about our legacy on climate change and what action looks like. And with this documentary that we just watched as our jumping off point, I want to dig into what individuals can do to address climate change and what action looks like, and where the responsibility for all this mess that we're in really lies. So Alice, let's start with you. I want to talk about, ask you, how elders in Inupiaq communities where thawing permafrost and the effects of climate change are this very real present thing and have been for a while. How are elders in that community responding to the climate crisis?
Hi, Sabrina. Thank you for that question. Can you hear me? Yes. So Uvunga Qannik, my name is Alice Qannik Glenn. Qannik is my Inupiaq name. It literally translates to snowflake. But what's more important about the literal translation of my name is who I'm named after, because we are thought to carry the same spirit of the people that we're named after in Inupiaq culture. So I was named after my grandmother on my dad's side. Her name is Alice Qannik Glenn. I was fully named after her. And I think that in Inupiaq culture, we have such high regard, or our elders are held in such high regard and revered as knowledge holders, as culture bearers. They are, they guide the next generation. And even that includes even in climate change and ideas about what to do about climate change, because they have lived their lives and seen the most. So we turn to our elders to ask, what kinds of things have changed, but also what kinds of things have remained the same. There is a time and place to talk about a lot of the changes, and that happens a lot, and it's great. But I think as an Inupiaq person covering a topic that affects Inupiaq people directly, I have a responsibility to my people to also ask questions like what kinds of things have sustained us for thousands of years. Inupiaq people are known to have lived in the Arctic since time immemorial. So that goes as far back as the pyramids, you know, and so we didn't just, that wasn't by mistake, you know, that was by scientific design, you know, and so our elders are those that hold that knowledge to guide us forward. So we turn to them in times of crisis and times of guidance. And that is definitely something that we hold dear to our hearts as Inupiaq people.
Thank you for that. So Maiyim, I know you're also working with elders in your community and helping to inspire climate action. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those individual actions look like that that you're hoping to draw out of that group?
Well, Elders Climate Action as a group is very focused on legislative change and on communicating with policymakers, as someone mentioned, is so important for us to do now. Talking about the climate, I think, is the #1 thing to do. And when we talk, we need to be educated about it. So Elders Climate Action does a lot of educational programs where our research team really digs into the science, and they, coupled with our legislative team, go through the bills that are introduced, and we're working at the state level and decide what legislative action to take. So we do a lot of that. And then also on a very personal front, lately we've been exploring what elders can do to help their kids make these changes. In that some of us have investments, which we're going to do some talking about getting your investments out of fossil fuel. How do you get them into like decarbonizing your kid's house? You know, that's something that really excites me, to think that all the grandparents around, we could be, you know, helping our kids make these changes. I'm going to buy my older daughter an EV soon.
So this idea of basically generational wealth and how you can help lift up the generation below.
It's kind of a new idea, but I think it's a perfect one for Elders Climate Action. And I love the way it couples with the idea of divesting from fossil fuels and stopping that money change. And, you know, my investment guy said, if I do that with my kids, that's high impact.
Yeah, great. So Nathaniel, I feel like so many people often when they talk about what can I do on climate, it's very easy to say just vote. But what you do with your organization goes far beyond that, like sort of lip service. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the work that you all do to turn words into action.
Sure. Thank you, Sabrina. So the Environmental Voter Project has come to realize that there are millions, and I truly mean that, millions of already registered voters who care deeply about climate and the environment who never vote. So just to give you a sense of that, 10.1 million super environmentalists who are registered to vote skipped the 2016 presidential election. Over 12 million skipped the last midterm election. These are huge numbers. And so what we do at the Environmental Voter Project is not just in those big federal elections, but also in state and local elections, working year-round. We use data science to identify these non-voting environmentalists. And then we work with thousands of volunteers around the country, many of whom, I would even say the majority of whom are elders, to contact these voters with nonpartisan messaging, but tested messaging that we know is going to turn them from non-voters into consistent voters. And yes, voting is so important, but in particular, being a volunteer and helping other people vote, helping these non-voting people who care deeply about climate and the environment show up is so important, because no matter what aspect of the climate crisis you're looking at, politics and policymaking is pretty much an indispensable actor. And there has never been a politician who's done something out of the goodness of their heart. Like, they do it because voters are forcing them to. And unless we ramp up voter demand for political action, not just at the federal level, but anywhere, even in your little town, it's going to be really hard to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I guess Alice, in Alaska, you all just saw the power of the vote to really change things with the recent House election, swinging things there. Okay, but we're talking about individual action here largely, but climate change is a huge systemic problem. Like we did not cause climate change. We inherited climate change and a system that is perpetuating climate change. So who is best suited to address this? And I'm just going to kind of throw this out there for whoever wants to jump on it first.
I think all of us are. I mean, just because I think you're absolutely right that the responsibility doesn't rest on us. We are not the cause of this problem, but that doesn't mean that we can't be the cause of the solution. So yeah, don't feel guilty. None of us have as individuals like built brick by brick a coal-fired power plant, but we absolutely are empowered and able to stop this. And I don't know, I see that as an extraordinary opportunity. I mean, this is a discussion about our legacy. I mean, how many people can have a legacy of heroism, of really addressing maybe the greatest crisis humanity has ever faced?
I agree. It takes all of us. You know, we were talking last week and we came up with the phrase intergenerational responsibility. It's not any one generation's. I mean, we could point fingers, but why bother? It takes all of us. And I love the way we're really starting to work together, the elders to the youngers. We've got to build a movement of all of us together.
I agree, and I completely echo those statements. And it kind of brings up a memory of mine recently when we were going through a lot of civil unrest in our country. I remember there was a football team that was fundraising to buy football equipment for their team before the season started. And so they're going house to house asking for donations, you know, $20 here, $40 there. And I remember I was like, before I donated, I should have asked them, you know, what is your football team doing to combat racism at your school? Why don't we ask that question, you know, in terms of organizations and who we're collaborating with and who we speak to and who we dedicate our time to? What is your organization doing to combat climate change?
Yeah, it's a conversation we can have with everybody all over. I think that's the main thing. I mean, workplace, that's a prime example of where we need to be working.
Yeah, you know, so much of what we do at the Environmental Voter Project is built upon hundreds of behavioral science experiments. You know, we try to figure out which messages work best with which subgroups of people to turn them from non-voters into voters. And without getting into the details of what works and what doesn't work, all of the experiments reveal something that Alice sort of put her finger on, and that is the tremendous power we have as social beings in our communities. And it might not seem like a lot to just speak up and ask an inconvenient question of someone, but we're social animals. And that is enormously powerful because we go around our lives each day trying to figure out what's the right behavior in this situation? How do I want to be viewed in this situation? And if someone brings up something inconvenient for you or challenges you on something, that can really change behavior in your community. And so it's not a small thing to ask a football team what they're doing to be anti-racist. It's a very powerful thing, and we need to be comfortable using our social capital in those ways.
So you said you didn't want to go into the details, but I'm a reporter, so I definitely want you to go into the details. I'm very curious in this, when we're talking about the different generations, I'm curious if the messaging that gets through to people is dramatically different. Like, is there a core message on climate change that's going to resonate with someone in their 20s versus in their 40s versus in their 60s?
There is a core theoretical underpinning that resonates with all of them. And before I get to it, first, let me just sort of define an important difference in the types of messaging around climate change. There is, very broadly speaking, persuasion messaging, where you're trying to change someone's minds or opinions and getting them to care more about climate change. And then there is behavior change messaging, where maybe the person is already with you, they're just not taking an impactful action that you want them to. I am less of an expert in the first part, getting people to care about the climate crisis. But when it comes to changing their behavior, what works with all ages is what behavioral scientists in a broad sort of term call expressive choice theory. And the idea behind this is that we are social animals, and we aren't going through our lives making little cost benefit analyses like, econ robots and things like that. And so what you should not do is try to rationally convince someone to vote or spend their money in a particular way or something like that. Instead, what we do is we try to figure out who is our audience, and perhaps more importantly, who do they want to be? How do they want to be seen? And so we take advantage of those societal norms. And just to give you some particular examples, we will send people text messages and we'll say, hey, Sabrina, did you know last time there was an election, 127 people on your block of Main Street turned up to vote? Like pure juvenile peer pressure. But it works because we're very social animals. Or this is a technique that I bet all of you have recognized if you've ever volunteered for a campaign. Someone comes to your door, they say, do you plan to vote? And you say yes, and then they walk away and you think, gosh, that was it? Well, what they're taking advantage of is the societal norm that almost anybody wants to be thought of as an honest, trustworthy person. So if they can essentially trap you into saying that you're going to vote, that then allows someone else to come back to your door right before election day and say, Sabrina, I just want to remind you, 4 weeks ago, you said you were going to vote, and we know it's important to you to be an honest and trustworthy person. And Tuesday is your opportunity to follow through on that. And now we've equated the act of voting with whether Sabrina is honest or not, which is much more powerful than me trying to convince you of the value of your one vote. So we look for those societal norms. That's what really helps change people's behavior.
Alice and Maiyim, I'm curious, like in your work, if you feel like you see this element of peer pressure. I love this idea that the thing that makes us make bad choices on the playground when we're 7 years old, like my son often does, is also what maybe can drive some sort of action toward greater good. One of the things that I'm thinking of is how someone said to me a while ago that around heat pumps, they were like, one of our problems is it's not sexy. It's not a Tesla driving down the street. It's not an EV. It's not like you're not going out and cleaning up trash in a way that people can see you. It's not the same kind of really visible change that those other things are. But how do you elevate it? Because there is, I think, some power to what you do in public and how people perceive you. But we can move on from there, because I am this idea of like intergenerational. I'm really curious. I mean, we all saw in the lead up to the last presidential election, the rise in prominence of the Sunrise Group and how this like younger generation of climate activists really moved the needle on how the Democratic candidates were having to talk about climate change. And as a result, it changed the way that the Biden administration had to address climate change from day one. And so, and at the same time, we've got, there's climate action, we've got, a third act, which is really moving this kind of marshaling the energy of this older generation. And I'm curious how you see these generations kind of passing the baton back and forth and working together. And who wants to jump on that?
I think a lot of youngers might feel like it's hard to talk to elders about it. They might think that, oh, grandma's just stuck in what she believes and she's never going to change or anything. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, having become an elder myself, I think elders are still changing and still very interested in what's happening in society, and we have our experience to offer. So I suspect that a lot of people in this crowd tonight maybe you're not an elder yet. Maybe something like Elders Climate Action is something for your parents or your grandparents to get into. But we need to keep talking across the generations about these things. And you know what? I think films like what we saw are a great thing to share with families. I'm always looking for films that I can share with my family. And we do look at things like Earth Emergency, the film that was made from these shorts. And we can use them, you know, when you're sitting down for a family TV night, visiting over the holidays. You know, maybe it's not going to be the feature film that everybody wants to watch that's just fun, but maybe you get in a 15-minute section on some aspect of what's happening with the climate.
In my experience in Alaska, I think that there isn't an issue of whether there is a stage or if there's a voice. I know that there is. There's a big young person's voice, a presence, kind of speaking out and you know, talking about the concerns about climate change. That's a big thing. I think the thing that I'm not seeing as much is coming to the table with solutions. I mean, anyone can run around screaming their head off and saying the sky is falling, but you know, if you don't come to the table with some kind of solution, what good is it doing? You know, and so I think that that's a big thing. Even gearing up here, I now work as a special assistant to the president at an organization called the Alaska Federation of Natives, which helps to provide a unified voice of all Alaska Native tribes, village corporations, and nonprofits to have a unified voice in policy. And in part of our annual conference that we have a convention coming up here at the end of October, is something that a partner organization, First Alaskans Institute, holds an event called Elders and Youth, where we intentionally bring elders of our communities in with you know, young leaders, young change makers, thinkers, doers, and we put them in the same room and they have, you know, conversations. We have conversations with one another, we learn, and we figure out what are the biggest issues that both generations can get, you know, behind and look for solutions for. So that is that's a big thing here in Alaska. I forget what was the first part of your question, Sabrina.
Oh, who knows at this point, but I'm curious. But I'm curious, like so when those conversations are happening, like where are these kind of solution points or these action points that they come to? Are there, can you think of any examples?
Well, for specifically for AFN, I know that there is, you know, this is a statewide kind of congregation of all of the tribes that are members of AFN and village corporations and regional corporations to get together. They create resolutions. And the resolutions have to be statewide in nature, non-divisive in nature. So they're kind of issues that are at the forefront of what we're experiencing as Alaska Native people today. And AFN takes that upon themselves, staff does, to communicate that with leaders, leaders of the state and even leaders of, you know, of the country, and even international. We're inviting in international guests from New Zealand and Japan, Indigenous folks from Japan, Hawaii, to this convention where we all share best practices and what we can all do to move forward from those. And you know, there's no other organization like that in Alaska at this point. AFN is the voice and is the engine behind what you know, some of these tribes have been, you know, thinking about these issues that are happening in our communities. Yeah, so I mean, we're excited. It's going to be finally our in-person event this year after 3 years, you know, after the pandemic. I'm sure you all can relate to something like that, but yeah, we're excited to see what issues come forward this year and what we can do, and how that, you know, the pandemic kind of put all of these things about climate change on hold for a bit, or, you know, stalled some things, but I mean, I imagine now that people are congregating again, those things will start to come back to the forefront.
Yeah. So a question that has come in, because we'll take those as they come. Please feel free to submit more if anyone else has them. But what would be the top 5 actions that humanity should take immediately to address the climate crisis? So things that we can do now. And I guess I'm going to narrow it a little bit, because we should all transition off of fossil fuels immediately, but we can't do that in those of us in this room. Like, we cannot get the whole system to decarbonize immediately, alas. So let's talk about like what I guess top 5 actions that you think people should take to address the climate crisis.
I have
You don't
one.
have to list 5. Let's just go. Just throw them out there.
My verse is listen to Indigenous voices. Indigenous peoples have been living in tune with the earth for thousands and thousands of years. And they, some people think that maybe, or they romanticize Alaskan Native people or Native American people that were in the past. We're not. We're very much here today thinking about what we can do and envision for the future. And a lot of that depends on things that have sustained us for thousands of years. Yes, we have, these values that are set in the past, but that doesn't mean that we're stuck there. That means that we're here today and that we have ideas moving forward. There's just so much that we just scratched the surface of what Native American people know. And I think that there are some issues right now with exploitation of knowledges that has happened since, colonization of what is now known as the United States. Our knowledges, our practices have been exploited in many ways. So what that requires is relationship building with Indigenous communities first and foremost, and then hopefully, some of those ideas that we can work together will come forward.
I love that. I remember when I was a reporter reporting on the Arctic for many years. And I remember there was like a moment when a lot of scientists doing traditional university housed scientific research realized they should perhaps start paying attention to some Indigenous knowledge on some of the things that they were researching. And like all of this information that was just there, if you just bothered to have a conversation with the elders in these communities, it was like you could spend 10 years on a research project, or you could have a conversation with someone from this community. And I mean, ideally there's a mix of the two, but it's refreshing to see the growing awareness, but it does seem like a lot of room to grow on that still. Yeah, thanks for that, Alice. All right, what else can we do on climate now?
We've got to become political animals. Political animals. I think most people are aware, perhaps they would view it as cynicism, but even if not, most people are aware that our politics has evolved to a point now where there isn't so much ideological consistency as there is just politicians doing what it takes to get elected. And I realize that that's kind of frustrating and maybe even depressing, but I would suggest that if all politicians are doing is going where the votes are, well, that actually doesn't mean that each of us are unimportant as individuals. It actually means our votes matter a lot. In fact, it means that our votes are really the only things that matter to politicians. And so I would just encourage you, get in the game of politics. And that doesn't just mean the midterm elections that are coming up in 33 days. It also means your local city council. There are locally run utilities, but also electing the right city councilors can change building codes and zoning codes and traffic regulations and deal with open space issues. But take it as someone who's run dozens of political campaigns. Like, if the only people who show up to vote are the ones who care about potholes in public schools, that's what the politicians are going to care about. And that's not that potholes in public schools are unimportant, but if those of us who care deeply about the climate crisis don't show up and exercise our power, I'm sorry, politicians aren't going to ever lead on it.
And I think it doesn't take as much of us as we think to make a difference sometimes. I know my state representative, one time I'd been corresponding with him about some campaign or other, and he says, I got 10 emails on that. And I went to the House Speaker and told him that was enough for him to notice. And we have so many easy ways to act politically now. I mean, there are great organizations around us. Some of them are here tonight that set up campaigns that all you have to do is go click the button, you know, and write to your senator, write to everybody that you want to. And they really do listen to us. At Elders Climate Action, we'll have our state senators and representatives and other officials come talk to us frequently. And something we hear almost every time is, we need to talk to you guys. We want to hear from you, because they can't know about everything. They really do look to us sometimes to hear what we know. So we have to be out there being a political animal, making those relationships with those politicians and doing it so that we can convey some educated knowledge that we have about these situations, that we can get through to them. And my experience has been that they welcome it. They want to get it from us.
Right. So we are running out of time. We have 4 minutes left in this discussion. But there's a question that came in, I think is a great one, which is wondering if there are actions that elders are uniquely in the best position to take.
I don't want to be a broken record here, but the most precious resource on any political campaign is time. You can't push the date of election day. And oftentimes people, especially if they're retired or if their children are no longer at home, they have more of that most precious resource that every campaign is looking for. I mean, I'm running an organization right now that's running campaigns in 17 states. I know that we've got 5.8 million individual non-voting environmentalists that we're trying to mobilize. And we're very much aware of how many volunteer hours per day it's going to take to convert non-voters into voters. But this goes with someone who's running for a library trustee too. I mean, no matter who you are or where you live, elders often, certainly not always, but often have more time than people at other ages. And so use that time to create your climate legacy. That is something that you absolutely have a unique ability to do.
I think at this time, it's about mobilizing people before this next election too. And Elders Climate Action has worked with Environmental Voter Project from the beginning, and it's great. If I'm going to say it as an inside thing, they do great work. And you can, use your phone, elders can use their laptops or their pads or whatever, that they like to use, and take 10 minutes at a time and click those things. You can send texts or send letters. It's not hard.
All right, Alice, I'm going to give you the last word on this. I mean, what if not? I mean, obviously you are not an elder, so, but if not, either an action that elders are uniquely kind of suited to take on climate, or just another thing that people can do now on climate.
I think elders have a unique ability to empower younger people, their children, their grandchildren. I know that I always consult my grandparents when anything big comes into my life, and whether I take advantage of something or not. I remember, and I'm just thinking specifically at this point, I was at a funeral and I was going to sing a song, but I was a little bit nervous to do it by myself, but my grandmother came behind me and sang the song with me, and I think that I wouldn't have been able to do it without her. And so that's something that I think uniquely elders have this calming presence to let us know that we're doing the right thing and that they're here to support us. So I think that, elders have that ability to empower the younger generation.
Love it. All right. Well, on that note, thank you all for your time and for your thoughtfulness and the wonderful work that you're doing. And I'm going to pass this back to Ingrid.
Wow, thank you all. I feel personally 10 years younger just tapping into all of your passions and hearing about all the wonderful things that we can do to bring about change. So thank you for that. As mentioned earlier, I'm Ingrid Geis from 350 Mass, and together with the Boston Metro chapter of the Climate Reality Project, we are glad that you could join us this evening for the permafrost screening and the panel discussion. We're also excited to share in the chat a calendar of events that you can take between now and Election Day, and we'll also send you a copy via email. But it might take a day or two to get the email out, so we're going to give you a little sneak peek this evening. The calendar starts tomorrow with the Climate Reality Project's 24 Hours of Reality. So visit 24hoursofreality.org to participate. We'd like to thank Sabrina Shankman, whose climate coverage at the Boston Globe is a must read. And thank you to our panelists, Maiyim Baron, Alice Qannik Glenn, and Nathaniel Stinnett. We'd also like to thank several folks behind the scenes whose help was critical: Adam Travis, Melanie Wallace, Jeff Levinson, Paul Hesselschwert, Kurt Newton, Larry Yu, and others at Climate Reality Project and 350 Mass who helped make this event a reality. And last but not least, please check out the rest of the Feedback Loops short films at feedbackloopsclimate.com. And if you're a teacher, as mentioned earlier, educational materials will be available for schools. So check it out. And with that, I would like to thank all of the participants for joining us tonight, and have a good night. Thank you.